doing live-in. So the cost-wise, it's much better to have live-in, but let's look at the advantages, disadvantages of each, just sum it up. So 6 to 10 caregivers per week doing 8-hour shifts is going to cost you almost $4,000 more a month. The advantage and disadvantage. So let's say you have a live-in caregiver. Because of that, you've only got maybe 2 or 3 caregivers coming in each week. So it's very manageable, which means you're going to get a much higher quality caregiver, because you're going to keep the caregivers that you like, that their demeanor, the social aspect, how they communicate with the senior or the client is going to be much higher, because you don't have a large of a pool that you need to choose from. You can focus on very high quality caregivers that you want to have come in for lengthy periods of time. So that's a huge advantage for having a live-in. Now, if you have an 8-hour caregiver, you're going to need 10 caregivers per week. You're not going to have that. You're going to have caregivers that are good, that are bad. Your control and your management level go through the roof, which means your quality goes down. Another huge advantage to live-in, having a caregiver that stays there, is the ability for that caregiver to spend more time in the house, which equates to you're going to have someone who's going to understand the wants and needs of the client much quicker and faster, and they're going to understand it from the aspect that they're living in the home. They're going to know exactly what the client likes to eat, what she doesn't like to eat. When you have a caregiver that comes in every 8 hours, they're not going to pick that up, not as quickly anyways. They're not, it's going to take them weeks and weeks, where a regular caregiver coming in that's doing live-in could probably pick it up in a week or maybe a week and a half, because they're going to be there the whole time. They're going to know the kind of food that's to serve, so the quality is going to go up through the roof. And being in this industry for 15 years, what I've discovered is caregivers who do live-in have a tendency to do these long-term. So you may find the perfect caregiver, and you may have that caregiver in the home for 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 years. Where when you do 8-hour shifts with caregivers, you're going to find the amount of caregivers who are coming and going, who, you may love a caregiver, but she's only there for 3 or 4 weeks because her other client her needs are more pressing. So that enters into the mix quite a bit. So some of the disadvantages of a live-in caregiver. So everything I've kind of given you so far is a rosy story for doing live-in, but in reality there is some disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is the caregiver has to sleep. So if they're going to be there for 3 days, you got to get sleep. They got to sleep. So if they're sleeping in the day, sleeping at night, as long as they can get a good solid 8 hours of sleep. If the client needs something in the night, it's nice to have someone there who can get up real quick and take care of a need. If the medication needs to be, 2 a.m. Medication, they can, get all that ready and prepared. But the reality is they need to sleep. So if you've got a situation where sleeping is an issue, where the clients may be Alzheimer's, dementia, they got sundowners, and they're up all the time, you may find that having a living caregiver may not be a good match. But most people will find that even if they do have that situation, maybe having another caregiver coming in just to cover a few hours will help, have a family member in there to help. But every situation is different, so you need to figure out where you are with your situation. But they need to sleep, so that's one of the disadvantages. And of course, another disadvantage is room. And not only are they going to spend that much time in the house, but they got to have their own space. They got to have a bed to sleep in. The state of California says they have to have a bed and a nightstand. Imagine that. But so you got to have all of that set up ready to roll. And most people who live in their house more than likely have more than one bedroom, so that's not an option. I mean, that's not an issue, but that's something you need to look at too. So I would advise that if you do need to have around-the-clock care, live-in is probably the way to go. You just get a better quality caregiver. You're going to find the home environment is going to be much more stable, less people coming and going, and the quality of caregiver just goes through the roof, because they're there long-term. They know what the client likes, doesn't like. It makes it just a much better situation, because most caregivers who do this prefer it, because they like to get in and get out. And if they work 3 or 4 days, and they know they've got 3 or 4 days off. And but the only thing I'd like to discourage you from is a live-in full-time, all 100% one caregiver 7 days a week. You run into a lot of issues, especially in the state of California. And when you need to change out that caregiver, you may run into a lot of legal issues because of that caregiver has and declare residency, and that's another big issue. But that's why you have multiple caregivers doing 3 or 4 days at the most for living. That way you avoid that, because obviously if they're only there 3 days a week, then they have their own home they go to the other 4. So living caregiving, if you need around-the-clock care, it really is the best way to get the best care. And the bottom line is we want to make sure the client has their needs met, and it all comes down to quality of the caregiver. Long-term living is by far the best, because it allows you to pick and choose who's going to fit personality, work ethics, if they match the home, if they match the tempo of the home. You know, if a senior's got certain expectations and you've got a caregiver in there 3 days a week, they're going to know pretty quick if that's a good fit, a good match. So, all right, next video we're going to talk about, well, we'll just continue on to the next one. Thanks. Have a great day.